What are your thoughts on artist names? Hi Dom, my question is about developing your own signature sound. In an ideal world, I want to work doorless. Writing a track is somewhat easy and straightforward, but finishing a track is an entirely different thing. Dom, how do you stay motivated working on music/projects that won't belong to you at the end of the day? My question is about labels. Do you really need a label today? And it's just the most dangerous thing I've ever done. What next? How do I Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is Friday. It's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, what have I been doing this week? If I'm honest, most of it has just been admin stuff. I touched on last week that I'd kind of finished my album in terms of core production. Which now means there's a lot of admin stuff to go through because I don't know what label it's going to go on. I don't know what the plans are, when it needs to be released. There's a lot to think about and a lot to plan, and I've commissioned an artist to create the album cover. I've got ideas. It's all lots and lots of stuff to plan. Also, I'm sort of looking at performing it live if I can, or live, and I need to kind of work out the logistics of how any of that happens, really. So yeah, all very exciting to me, but boring to you stuff. Not really much to talk about. One thing I have done though this week is I have updated the tonal display playlist on Spotify. Link is below this video. So yeah, check that out. It's a fresh new 2 hours of just good music, really nice melodies and sounds that make you think. Yeah, I think that's it for admin. I'm not really, it's all been admin. So yeah, there we go. Moving on. Let's have a look at last week's video. Starting at the top. Not Your Human. Ooh, I can't wait for the album. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's going to be a while yet. I would imagine the second half of this year, but I honestly don't know much more than that at this point, because there's lots to kind of discuss first. Principal Music, no questions, just came to say that I love Low Pass Friends and I'm excited to see new stuff. Didn't know you were so involved with your community until now. Subscribed. Well, high five for that. Thank you very much. Gold Toast, hi Dom Groove, high five. What are your thoughts on artist names? I've been trying to come up with a new artist name for myself. I've been using part of my last name as my artist name from the start. Is your artist name Gold Toast? In which case, is your surname Goldman? Goldstein? Gold? Or Toast? Could be Toast. And now kind of want to separate myself from my older work, and also because there are more producers that use the same name, which is not ideal, definitely. I don't know how that works really with, let's use Beatport or iTunes or whatever for an example. When you've got two artists of the same name, how does that work? I mean, I suppose they're attached to a label or distributor which would be attached to one person rather than both artists, but I feel like that could be confusing. Yeah, let alone before we even talk about fans or whatever. Yeah, so that's fair enough. As for giving you tips, You say, problem is, however, I've no idea what my new artist name will be. Any tips, ideas, or thoughts on this? No, is the short answer, because I am terrible at thinking of names, and honestly, that's the hardest part of, I would say, my job. Whenever I've set up anything from record label to publishing to whatever, and I've worked under different artist names for certain projects, and still do, mostly for, if, for example, I'm doing, if I get commissioned to do, I don't know, a track for an advert, and it needs to be super happy, cheesy, something melodies, clearly I'm not going to put that out under my own name, because I wouldn't want all of you guys watching this to sort of stumble on it on Spotify and go, oh, is this the kind of stuff he does? Or even worse, maybe people who've never heard of me, for that to be the first track that they hear under my name, and them to go, oh, he's a terrible artist, or oh, he just does cheesy, happy folk pop. I don't know. So coming up with those names has always taken me an eternity, even for the ones that I really don't care about, and this is, like I say, so, when I'm working under these names, they're kind of throwaway names, really, that they don't really mean, and they don't need to be a clever name or anything like that. In fact, one of them is literally just I picked a common first name, and then for the surname, my housemate at the time was with me. We were both working on this project, and it was a very, very specific style, and so we just wanted a name, so we ended up choosing the name of the company that sold the calendar on my wall as the surname of the artist. So that's how terrible I am at coming up with artist names. And you guys will notice my name is Dom Kane. I'm known as Dom Kane. I was born as Dom Kane. Yeah, that's my real name. It's not an artist name or anything. And maybe that's just showing how unoriginal I am. I don't know. Yeah. So it's a tricky one, but good luck. I honestly don't know. I don't know how people come up with these names. Yeah, it's tricky. So there we go. I apologise, Mr. Toast. Mane Ostling. Advice sounds good, man. No worries. And I hope it all feels a bit better. Tune in the hole. Hi Dom, my question is about developing your own signature sound. How to achieve it? I can think about making your own presets and storing them, making your own sample packs and using them, or are there any other strategies which you personally use or which someone else uses? Thank you. Do you know what? I feel like stuff like signature sounds is the kind of thing that just happens. It certainly did for me, and to be honest, one of my biggest signature sounds, if I can call it that, one of my most common sounds that I use, is just a straight up preset. So it's not even, I've been a sound designer and a preset creator and a loops designer for I don't know how many years, decades, and yet one of the sounds I'm probably most known for is just a straight up preset, and anyone who's seen my tutorials will know that. I don't hide that fact. It's just a preset I stumbled upon and fell in love with, and it worked with the melodies that I was writing at the time. Admittedly, I don't use it as much now because it's just kind of things have evolved, but that was kind of one of the sounds I was kind of known for, I suppose. It was just a straight up preset. So I don't think it's that important to worry about making it, how you make your signature sound. And I guess everybody wants a signature sound, but it's really one of those things that just comes within time, I guess. Some people find it on day one. Some people don't ever find it. I don't know. But for me, I didn't really find my niche sound. And even then, I'll finish that sentence first. I didn't find what I considered my niche sound for probably 10 or 15 years of producing. So that's a long time. And I've said on this channel before, things don't come quick and easy to me. Then, my entire career has not been quick and easy or overnight success or anything like that. And which is one of the reasons why I set up this channel, is because I kind of felt like I needed to put my story out there a bit, in that I'm not an overnight sensation. I'm not a big, rich and famous, big selling, whatever. However, I earn a living from music and I'm very happy. And that's kind of my story, as boring as it is. And I've achieved some things that I'm hugely proud of, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to a signature sound, I think it's a tricky one, because you've got to kind of first of all ask yourself, what is a signature sound? It's a sound that you are able to pick someone out from a crowd with. It's a sound that people recognize you for, and sometimes that can be more than just a sound or a preset or a loop or a whatever. Sometimes it can be a production technique. Maybe your mixes are particularly bright and airy or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a sound. But like I say, it's just one of those things that I guess for me, I stumbled across a preset that I fell in love with, and I didn't care that it was a preset. I didn't think, oh, this is now my sound. It wasn't quite that black and white. But it's just a sound that I remember stumbling across and going, oh, love that. Drench it in some reverb, throw in some delay. I think I carved out a little bit of something with the EQ, added a bit more saturate. I tweaked it. It's not just straight out of the box preset, but actually if you used the straight out of the box preset, it probably wouldn't be too far off the truth. But yeah, so I tweaked it here and there just because I loved the sound and I was playing with it, and it just sounded good. Wrote a track and decided I liked it so much I wrote another track using the same sound, just slightly changed it, and that kind of became my thing, I suppose. It was not a conscious decision. I don't think I sat there going, right, this is my signature sound. So in a weird way, my advice is no advice, in that just don't worry about it. It'll come. And I guess the best way you can find your signature sound is really, first of all, absolutely, truly just do what you love. Because if you don't have a passion for it, you're not going to explore. And that leads me on to reason or advice part number 2, which is experiment. You've got to experiment. Just play with new sounds, new ideas, new combinations, I guess is really, and that's what creativity is all about. Let's be honest, creativity is all about combinations. If you were to look at a poet, a poet is using words that everybody knows. Everybody's used those words before. They're not unique words. They're not new words, but the combination of words are maybe forming somewhat new sentences, but then the combination of sentences are forming the poetry, and that in itself is unique. If you look at a piece of music in the same way, the notes within a scale we've all used before. There isn't a note that hasn't been used in a scale. But when they form melodies and phrases, they can become somewhat unique in themselves. And when those phrases are combined together to make an entire track, then the entire track is unique in itself. I've never thought or said that out loud, and I quite like that. I'm going to have to try and remember that as a description for something. So there we go. I think don't worry about creating sample packs or designing presets from scratch, just find sounds and music that you love and just play with those sounds and tones and melodies, and you'll find something that you just fall in love with. And that's really what it's about, something that you can then evolve. And it kind of needs to be somewhat malleable, because like I say, the sound, or some of the sounds that I was most known for, I suppose, when I first started sort of climbing the ranks, they had to be able to evolve with me, which I think they have over the last however many years. So yeah. Nathan Saskarinskis, hey Dom, Groove, high five. I need some advice yet again. A while ago, I got the K2 and had issues with automating the filter, and it turned out it didn't have MIDI CC. I remember that. So I took your advice and recorded the filter manually, and well, one thing led to another, and I decided to take the jump into the doorless world. Whoa, hang on, that's a jump, which was something I've wanted to do for some time. Fair enough. Okay. Amazingly, it has really made my workflow faster, and I feel my production quality has increased. Anyhow, I've hit a stumbling block, which is actually recording the music. Currently, I use my Electron Octatrack as the main mixing hub, and the outputs of this go into my sound card, and I record the master. This is good except for when it comes to mastering or editing parts, as I have to go back and re-record them, or find individual parts and then solo each track as needed. So, in an ideal world, I want to work doorless, but record each device into its own channel in a DAW for editing later, or even just resampling. I'm not sure what the best way of achieving this would be. I'm contemplating a mixer, as I've seen some with a USB interface, but I'm not 100% sure. Edit. I've since looked at getting a second sound card and maybe connecting via ADAT to my main interface so I can expand it, but now I'm just confused as to the best way to do this. Okay. So, you're triggering instruments, I assume, via MIDI, unless you have 10 hands. Not that it needs to all be triggered. I suppose if you've got drum machine, it just plays the loop. Fine. Okay, forget that. You've got a multitude of hardware instruments, and they're all going into your sound card. I guess my question is, how are they getting into your sound card? You must have a very big sound card, and if you don't already have a mixer or ADAT expansion. But first of all, I would say ADAT expansion, yes, do that for your sound card. I have one on the floor. I think it's not. Yeah, it's not on that rack. And it comes in handy when you've got, several synths and they're all going into one sound card, because you can then take the opticals of that into the software version of the sound card, and yeah, it just makes life a lot easier. I mean, so you want a DAW basically just to record each channel. So essentially, I would say use a mixer is probably your best bet. I mean, there's a multitude of mixers out there, so it kind of depends on what your budget is. But one of the best bang for buck, and this is not cheap, I mean, we're talking a couple of grand, but the best bang for buck desk I ever used, I think, was a Toft analog. I believe the guy was called Malcolm, is called Malcolm Toft, but it's Toft Systems or Toft analog desk. To me, had some of the cleanest throughs and least noise that money could buy, or affordable money could buy. Not that it's that affordable. You get what I'm saying. Otherwise, you kind of need to be careful, I suppose, with a lot of mixers that are out there. If you look on the shops, production equipment shops, a lot of mixers are kind of a bit noisy and a bit shit, to be honest. Yeah, just be careful with that. But yeah, I would say your best bet is just to get a mixer. And basically, if you have, let's pretend, a 16-channel mixer and you've got a 16-channel ADAT, then channel 1 on your mixer the output goes to channel 1 of your ADAT, which then feeds into your sound card or DAW or computer or 8-track mixer, whatever it is you've got on the other end. Channel 2 does exactly the same, so on and so forth. So you're basically feeding individual channels in that can stay separated into the software. That would be my best bet, and you're kind of mixing on the spot then, I would say. If you're running it through a mixer and the individual mixer channels go to the ADAT channels, then you're kind of pre-mixing it as you go. But it means that if later on you decide that actually there's too much low end in that kick or whatever, then you're able to just solo that kick channel in the DAW that it was recorded in. So yeah, makes more sense, I think. Hopefully that helps. Otherwise, I've not understood your question. Moving on, Tech-alike music. Hey Dom, thanks for this discussion following my question about learning in audio production. It all makes sense and didn't feel weird at all. Good point about synthesis, by the way. Groove, high five. Those AMA videos are not boring at all. You're a true, felt and humble producer, sharing a lot with others and telling the truth about this never-ending journey, as well as real facts about the audio industry. No hype shit content here as opposed to many other YouTube channels or social feeds, and no bots, and AI won't replace that, though they will surely try. Keep it on. Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of feel like sometimes I wonder if I should be doing the loud "What's up YouTube? Hey guys," and whatever, because and the clickbaity titles and all of that, let's be honest, they get the views, they get the numbers, and they probably get the money, but it's just not me. So yeah, you just have to suffer it anyway. Cavacay, another excellent AMA, always the highlight of the week. Groove, high five. Fantastic news about the album. That must feel like a huge step forward. It kind of does, but it's also a bit scary. I was thinking the other day, I've been producing for 25 years now, and this is my first full artist album, and it's one of those things where you sort of we communitively have talked in the past on this channel about how when you're learning music production, you write a track and 2 weeks later, that's old, that sounds terrible, my new stuff is even better. And then as you start getting better at production, maybe that 2 weeks becomes, you write a track and 6 months later you hear it and you go, oh, that's terrible, that's old style me, that is, my new stuff is much better. And you keep sort of telling yourself, well, my new stuff is much better. And I don't think that ever really stops. It certainly hasn't for me, and I kind of don't want it to stop, because if I ever get to a point where I think, oh yeah, my old stuff is amazing, I feel like I'm probably not progressing, and that's probably not a good situation to be in. So when you're writing an album, a whole body of work, and particularly my album for me tells a story, there's a narrative, it's a coherent body of work that has a beginning, middle and end, and I think because of that, you kind of, I've written it so that it can't really be tweaked very easily, which is why for long time followers of this channel will know that I kind of wrote an album a year and a half ago, and then deleted half of it last year, and then kind of started over again, and then things got replaced and it all got rewritten, and that took a long time to get to where it is now, because of the story, because of the narrative and the entire body, and it needing to be coherent. I couldn't just go, oh well, I'll take out these 3 tracks and then just replace it with, I'll just write 3 more bangers or whatever. It's not, the album doesn't have any bangers. It's trying to tell a story from start to finish. So if you pull 3 tracks out, which I think I pulled 6 or 7, maybe more, 6 or 7 I think, because when you pull 3 out, you go, well, if those 3 are coming out, then you kind of have to pull these 3 out as well, and if I'm replacing that with this, and then you start rewriting elements, and then I wrote 2 or 3 tracks for it to go back in, and thought, right, well, these sit approximately in this space of the narrative. But then because of the sound design, I then had to go back to all the other tracks that stayed in and go, right, well, now these need reshaping to be able to get to what I've just written, and very complicated. So as much as it feels like a huge step forward musically and artistically, yes, I'm feeling really confident and happy about it. At the same time, I'm also thinking, what next? What do I do? Because it would be obviously easy to send it to, let's say, Mousetrap and go, here's an album, stick it out. I don't know. I don't think it's right for Mousetrap. I don't think it's their thing. So I don't know if that's really the way to go with it. And because it's taken me such a long time to get this body of work done, I kind of want everything to be right. So there's a part of me that's thinking maybe I self-release it, and in which is why I've been doing so much admin. There's a whole load of stuff that I'm looking at, basically. So as much as it feels like a huge step forward, it's kind of also now one of the most difficult situations I've ever been in artistically, in a weird way. So there we go. Following on from Mana's comment last week, I definitely relate. There we go. I do remember saying that people would relate. I've been producing as a hobby since 2003, but finally got the opportunity to spend more time, almost full-time, working on music about 18 months ago, since my wife's business took off. Well, high five to your wife. And good luck with her business, and high five to you, because that's awesome. Yep, I'm very lucky, I know. However, since then I've found it really hard to finish tracks. I have a project folder with literally hundreds of unfinished tracks, but the weight of expectation I have placed on myself seems to have triggered horrendous creative block. Stephen Pressfield's book The War of Art has helped but not cured it. So Mane, I feel your pain, and Dom, any left field tips I may not have already tried. It's tricky with stuff like this. For some people in particular, but sometimes for all people, if that makes sense. Writing a track is somewhat easy and straightforward, but finishing a track is an entirely different thing. I guess it depends on how you're struggling to finish the track. For a lot of people, it's the arrangement, and something I've always told people with arrangement, which is, funnily enough, a trick I learned from the old A&R manager of Mousetrap, who basically said, well, why don't you just grab a pop song that you like the arrangement of, and just cut it up into verse, chorus, intro, outro, whatever, all the parts, middle eight, bridge, whatever. And then just colour code it, and then just put your track underneath it. You don't need to hear that track. It doesn't need to be the same tempo. It doesn't need to be the same genre. It could be anything. And I think I ended up picking a Disclosure track or something for one of mine. And I sort of liked the arrangement of the Disclosure track, and it worked. And so I literally just cut it up into chunks and did that. So if arrangement is your thing, then look into that. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. I think I get what you're saying, because you're in a great situation, but that means there's no pressure to finish. So I don't know what you need to do. I guess what you need to do is you need to apply the pressure. And I don't know how you apply pressure on yourself. Because the only way to do that really is to force deadlines. Maybe if you collaborate with someone and set deadlines, or release through an imprint that gives you deadlines or something, or tell yourself, right, I need to achieve X amount of releases in this year, or something along those lines, I guess. But I always think if you've got hundreds of unfinished tracks, then I would imagine the vast majority of them, because for me, sometimes I'll start writing a track and I'll love what I'm doing so much I can't stop. But if I find myself writing the beginning of a track and then I'm stuck on the same loop over and over and over again, I tend to sort of go, you know what, it's obviously not a great track. It's a nice idea, but it's obviously not inspiring me right now. I'll bin it. And by bin it, I mean shelve it. I don't mean get rid of it completely, but just stick it in a folder where you can come back to it later, in 6 months' time or whatever, and you can test it out then. So yeah, I don't know if any of that will help. I can see you've got a PS, but I can also see my camera's about to reset, so I'll be back in a second. Clearly I'm back. But I've made the grave error of recently investing in one of those caramel syrup pumps for coffee, and it's just the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I'm struggling to have coffee without the caramel syrup in there now, because a caramel latte has always been my Achilles heel, and I finally caved and splurged on the syrup pump. It's all of a £5 for the pump and a £10 for the bottle of syrup, but yeah, just the most dangerous thing. It's like putting sugar in your coffee. It's very hard to stop having it now. So I feel like I probably shouldn't buy another one of these when they run out. Anyway, P.S. This is Cavacay's comment. P.S. I don't know if you've given up on The Expanse. Oh, do you know what? I've not given up. I forgot. That's what it is. So I won't reveal any spoilers. But on the subject of sci-fi inspiration, there's an explosion sound that made me do the same thing and go straight off to play with Bitwig. I bloody love that distress beacon sound from episode 1 as well. I don't remember the distress beacon sound, if I'm totally honest, but that's because my memory is just the worst. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what I'm going to be like when I'm a properly old man. My memory has always sucked from being a teenager. You know, teenagers have what they call teenage brain, and they just forget stupid stuff. Mine's been like that for life. I don't tend to just do dumb stuff, but I forget people's names, I forget films I've watched, I forget music I've written, all sorts. Anyway, so there we go. Yeah, I haven't given up on The Expanse, but I did see, though, for you sci-fi fans, which, let's be honest, probably most of you watching this, what was it, Altered Carbon on Netflix has got season 2. Now, I did briefly, because it flashed up on my Netflix yesterday, I did briefly watch part of the trailer because it auto-played, and I was looking at it going, I don't remember any of this. Talking of bad memory, there we go. That's evidence right there. But I do remember, I'm sure it was Altered Carbon, that I watched season 1 and thought, actually, I really enjoyed that. It wasn't like Stranger Things, or it wasn't up there with those, but it was definitely one where I kind of went, yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed it. So yeah, there's my hot tip of the week. Yeah, so there we go, that's that. FanFan87, Salut Dom, Groove, high five. Also, following on from Mana's comment last week, I'm 25. I started music 5 years ago with zero musical background, zero music theory lessons, zero mixing and DAW knowledge, nothing. And I already feel like time runs too fast and, oh shit, I'm not living from my music yet. It's a real frustrating feel. But the thing is, as Dom said, the passion is burning in the diehard passionated people's heart. If you make that fire more and more intense through the time, nothing will stop you. I was bad at school, I've been fired from jobs, living under the poverty threshold of my country for 2 years, and I'm still passionate like nothing can stop me for achieving to live from my music. And now, a month ago to be precise, I just started being signed, and some local foreign DJs ask me some tracks I show during various mixes. So it's only a question of time and faith, in my point of view, and fuel your inner fire always. Absolutely. And something you need to remember is that I've been in this industry a long time, so I've seen a lot of people fall by the wayside. And by that, I mean give up, basically. I've seen people who have had big, world leading DJ support and stuff, and they've kind of maybe gone a slightly wrong direction, which we all do, and we all make a few mistakes artistically or something, and they've just kind of, maybe they've chosen, I'm making this up now, but for argument's sake, let's say they played deep house and they jumped onto the tech house scene, and then the tech house scene collapsed or whatever, something along those lines, and then they've gone, oh, I don't know where to go from here, and it's been a bit of a struggle. And it happens to all of us. It's happened to me a multitude of times, because when I first started DJing back in the 90s, I was playing sort of progressive house and breaks and stuff like that. And then the turn of the millennium, breaks kind of really took a fairly big turn, and I was kind of half breaks, half what was house and what became electro. And then I wrote a couple of electro tracks, which really shot my career, because it happened at the same time electro just became a really big deal, which is what we now know as electro. But the very sort of birth of that, I was one of the first wave on that, by accident, I've got to admit, just because I loved that sound, and my DJ sets were full of that sort of, there was a tinge of what became electro in my sets. And then when the whole electro thing really exploded, and I had a couple of fairly successful tracks, and then I decided, actually, I don't really like this anymore. It's gone too commercial. It's gone too far in one direction. So I kind of sidestepped, or I felt like it was sidestepping into the tech house thing. And actually, I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy it. And I remember I had a couple of gigs where an hour into my set, and I'm sort of just sat there, just not really feeling the passion. So, it was then a struggle to get back into because electro had moved on and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my point being is that we all make mistakes in our careers. And you have to, if you've got that burning passion for something, then really you're never going to stop. Which is almost more important than anything else, and which is why I always advise to people to do something that you love, because you're going to hit obstacles, you're going to hit what you think are failures time and time again, but if you still have a deep desire to get through it, then you will get through it. Second to that, the other thing, and this is why I mentioned people falling by the wayside, is that the longer you can keep going, let's say, for example, when I first started, there were lots of other guys who were my colleagues or competition or whatever you want to call it, and they started dropping off. And every time one of them drops off, I'm getting lifted a little step. I'm lasting that little bit longer. For every person that gives up, they're freeing up a bit more space for you to further your career, because let's be honest, this music industry is kind of saturated. So yeah, it's just one of those things of who can last the longest. And I think that sounds shit, but there's probably a better way of looking at it than I'm explaining. But there we go, I digress. So yeah, I agree with FanFan87. Now, testimony aside, my question this week. Dom, how do you stay motivated working on music/projects that won't belong to you at the end of the day? It's very honestly difficult to me to imagine a musician working on a track for a client like, let's say, a baker making a baguette for his client. You said you lived 2 years without making releases under your name, so that's a mentality that makes me curious, because at the beginning of the day, we mainly make music for ourselves, right? Yes, thanks for the this week's episode. Cheers. So yeah, you're right. We get into the music industry to make music for ourselves, but you know what? This is going to come as a bit of a shock to you. I'm a bit of a nerd. I quite like computers and I quite like gadgets, and I like learning science and engineering and audio engineering, obviously. So if a client came to me and said, I want this kind of a track, let's pretend it's a a dubstep track with a Skrillex wobble. Obviously, being a house producer, I think, well, that's not really what I've ever done before. But as a nerd, I go, oh, that sounds like a challenge. That sounds like something I'll have fun doing. So that's how I view it. I think, I don't think anybody has ever come up to me and gone, can you make me a track that sounds like Dom Kane and I'll own the rights to it? Because clearly I just wouldn't do that. So I look at it as, when I've done these tracks, either under different names or for different people or whatever, it's usually in a genre that is not clashing with me and my own artistic style. So that's how I kind of view it, is just as a fun challenge. I've talked about ghost production in the past, and people have often sort of gone, oh, well, I can't understand how someone could be a ghost producer. You're not getting any of the credit. Well, the fact is I love music production. I love producing music. I don't really care about the credit. It's not, I don't produce music for people to then go, wow, Dom, you're amazing. If that's what all I wanted, then I'd become an Instagram model or something. I think I'm lucky enough that I'm old enough that being a music producer when I first started was not a big deal, really. And being a DJ, you were just the nerdy kid at the back of the room playing records. It was never really seen as an image-based thing. DJs, I luckily got into the whole dance music thing before DJs really kind of became famous, certainly before they became celebrities. I remember a certain DJ named Pete Tong, and I think his DJ fee was something like £500, and people were going, what, £500? Unbelievable. And then within probably 5 years it was 10 times that. So so my point being is that for me, music production is the passion. It's the producing, it's the engineering, it's the creating a new sound, it's the challenge of how do I get this to sound like this, or how do I make this sound do something. It's not really about the credit or the recognition or anything like that. I've never don't get me wrong, I'd love to be rich. I'd be okay with being famous, but it's not a goal of mine. It's not something I've ever aspired to obtain. It's just not. That's not. That might be maybe a bit of a bonus or something. Barely that, but for me, I make music because I like making music, and I don't care if it's for me or for someone else or whatever. It's the process I like. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. The process. So yeah, that's how I should have started that rant without ranting. Thanks for the episode. Cheers. Silent Warrior. Hello, Dom. My question is about labels. Do you really need a label today? When I go to Spotify or something, I don't even notice music that has been released on labels. I recently heard Undercats Britannia for the first time, and it happened... hang on 1 second, I'll be back. And I'm back with fresh coffee. Apologies, that was a delivery driver who won't be here until nearly 8 o'clock this evening. Me and my good lady wife have been saving up for a huge milestone event. We're getting a new bed and mattress. It's one of those things that only happens a few times in your life, and it's one of those big momentous occasions, to be honest, because of all the things that you constantly need in life. I think a good mattress and bed and a good chair is one of those things that you struggle to spend money on because they're ridiculously expensive for good quality ones, and there's always something more important. And the truth actually is there isn't much that's more important. You spend literally half your life in bed, and for me personally, I spend the other half of my life sat on this chair, which is long overdue replacement. The cushioning is pretty much dead on this chair. But they're hundreds of pounds for a new one, and I don't have hundreds of pounds spare, so there we go. Anyway, moving on. Where was I? Silent Warrior. Hello, Dom. My question is about labels. Do you really need a label today? So, pausing there, I think yes, you do need a label today. Because you could self-release, and I've talked earlier on about potentially self-releasing, but your job as a musician is to write music. It's not to, you may not be the best promoter or PR marketing guru in the world, and nor should you be. So I think labels are actually still very important. Even though you could do it yourself, I don't think you could do a better job yourself, and that's the big question. So, however, I think bigger labels are now more important than ever, and smaller labels are perhaps less important than ever, which might be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I still think that's the truth. So for me, for example, well, let's talk about my album. So my album, I could give to a small record label. And what are they going to do? They're going to upload it to their distributor, set the release date, maybe send it to some DJs, maybe pay for some Facebook adverts or something, if I'm lucky. They're not gonna make earth-shattering moves, because what is the strategy for releasing an album, or a single for that matter? For a single, you want it to get to radio DJs, you want it to get support in key areas. When you actually think about the release of a proper good release, let's say I gave my album to an independent, but major independent, let's say XL, label of labels for Britain. They've, for example, released The Prodigy. Well, when they put out The Prodigy's album, they have a budget that they spend on, whether it be TV ads or iTunes ads or social media or all the above, and billboards around London. There's a lot that goes into it. They'll have a marketing PR team that will tease out, and they know the strategy. They know what works. So, for example, you tease out, a video 1 week before release, or you set up interviews and you get the artist to do, clearly it's a different ballgame when it's someone like The Prodigy. For someone like myself, Radio 1 daytime DJs are not going to want to interview me, but there are still a multitude of things that a label could do for me, whether that be setting up an event of some sort, or getting the music to national press. There's a lot that can go on, things like Spotify editorial playlisting. If a record label has a history and has built relationships with, whether it be national press, reviews or critics, or bloggers even, or YouTubers to an extent, a label will have built up these relationships, and that's the goal of a label, is to build up relationships for their releases to become a smoother success. And that's kind of the point of a label. So and that's the difference between a label and a distributor. When we talk about self-releasing, what we're doing really is self-distributing. And unfortunately, I think for the vast majority of small labels out there, they're not really labels, they're just distributors under a different guise. They're branded distributors, I suppose, if anything. So you need to sort of ask yourself, well, what should a label do in this day and age? They should have existing relationships and communication with key parts of the industry, so they should know how to handle the release. I've talked on this channel in the past few weeks alone, or past couple of months even, and I've been considering it for years, of setting up a record label in this day and age. And I've sort of talked about the fact that if I was to start a record label in 2020, it would have an entirely different approach to sign a single, put out the single, sign a single, put out the single, Beatport, DJ charts, blah, 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 promo this, promo that. It's 2020 now. You don't need to send promos to DJs, because that's not really, it's not benefiting the release necessarily. So what if Carl Cox played your track? I hate to say that because I love Carl Cox, but him playing your track isn't going to boost sales. If it does boost sales, it's by a marginal amount. It's not, people who go to a Carl Cox gig are not DJs ready and waiting to buy your track. They're not Shazamming the entire set going, I need this track to DJ myself. And you really sort of fundamentally just feeding DJs with Beatport tracks and stuff like that. So I think, if I was to start a record label in this day and age, I would take a completely different mindset to it and make it more about the art, and it would be the listener streaming side of life that is important. So that's where it's a whole different ball game, whole different strategy. So I go off on a tangent there, but do you really need a label today? I think so, yes, if you want to develop a good strategy. But that label needs to be a good label that does that uses the right strategy. It's not always going to win. There's no guaranteed success for anyone in anything. I mean, if I put my album out on XL tomorrow, there's no guarantee that it would actually do well. But a label with that sort of experience, who's handled that sort of work in the past, is statistically more likely to be able to develop a good strategy for releasing my album. That's how I see it. So there we go. However, I have mentioned at the beginning of this video that I've considered self-releasing my album, and that's because I've worked a long time in the industry to know what strategy I want. Again, whether it works or not is an entirely different thing. I recently heard Undercats Britannia for the first time, and it happened on a playlist, and not because an advertisement pointed it out to me. Right, so there we go. How did it get to that playlist? Well, let's say it was on a Spotify playlist, or it doesn't even need to be a Spotify playlist, a blogger's playlist or whatever. How did it get there? Who put it there? Did the blogger find it themselves? Were they buying it on Beatport? Doubt it. Were they browsing Spotify themselves? Maybe. Would it have been more likely to end up on that playlist if somebody gave it to that blogger or that curator or whoever and said, how about this? And would it have made a difference if that person was not a random stranger but actually a fully functional record label with a good track record? Then the blogger's more likely to go, I know these guys, I'm going to listen to this. And then when they listen to it, they're more likely to go, this is going on the playlist. So again, it's the job of the label. In principle, it looks to me as if only one thing is important: to land on playlists or DJ sets. It is important. You also have a playlist. What about you? Do you get links somehow, or are you really looking for everything, or are they recommendations from friends? Hey Dom, have you heard of? Yes, yes, and yes. So most of mine, my playlist that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Tonal Display, 99% of those are tracks that they're either artists I already know of, or they're friends, or they're things that I've been recommended or discovered myself, because I do a lot of, obviously because of my job, I do a lot of music listening, and it's just, that's part of it. So a bit of everything, basically. But I'm not known for this playlist. This playlist is just a passion project for me. It's just something I love doing. I like sharing music that I like. But if my playlist had 1 million followers, which it doesn't. But if it had 1 million followers, then I think labels would want to hunt me down and get that. Good labels should hunt me down and get their tracks under my nose ready for it. So I think labels are important there. What could someone do to distribute their music via distributor to land on DJ sets in the clubs or playlists? Again, it's a track record. It's a relationship thing. It's, you could sign up to a promo company that maybe already has 1,000 DJs' email addresses, but let's be honest, how many other promos are they sending out a day? I know full well from my history of DJing, I get an unbelievable amount of promos sent to me. In fact, so much that about 5 or 6 years ago, I turned off my promo email. I don't accept promos anymore because I don't want to hear it, because it's a full-time job just to listen to those promos, and 99% of them are rubbish or irrelevant or just crap. So I don't want to spend 40 hours a week listening to crap. It's not what I want to do, which is why, again, I would rely on labels that I know and trust to send me quality content. So again, I keep coming back to how important a record label is in this day and age. I know this is a tricky question to answer. I don't think it is. So there we go. Thank you. Okay, and now I will watch your Sonic Academy Deadmau5 remix video. Best wishes. Thank you very much. High five. Yanis Melis Groove, high five. Fire Apple Red Groove, high five. Jockemeyer, I think this is the last one. I'll give St. Nicholas Groove, high five, I can see, and Jockemeyer Groove, high five. Dom, I doubt anybody would be here if we thought your rants were boring. No apologies needed. Thanks for the recommendation of the True Peak limiter. I too can relate to Mana's frustration. I started back in 2013 and progress was so slow. I too put a lot of pressure on myself to make big things happen. I guess I just wanted to be able to ditch the day job. I'm almost 42 and I'm a little more patient with myself. I'm a sponge for any knowledge I can get on music production, and one day I might get good at it. I think your reality checks have been invaluable. There's plenty to do without making it to Deadmau5 status. I love melodic techno, but recently discovered lo-fi hip-hop and boom bap. I love learning about it and I love writing it. I love chopping samples. I used to hate the idea of not coming up with my own melodies and chord progressions, but chopping is an art. It absolutely is, and if you disagree, then you bring that up with Cold Cut. I love learning about it. I love writing it. All this is to say, as you said, we all don't have to be big time 4 on the floor house producers / DJs. Find what you love and do it because you love it. If some fame happens, then so be it. What a great way to finish this episode. You're absolutely right. And, I think, again, I've kind of said it before, probably even in this video, that one of the reasons I set up this channel is to kind of explain to people. I know that some people have seen, oh, you've released on Mousetrap, therefore you must be basically Deadmau5 driving Lamborghinis or whatever it is he drives. I have no idea. As much as I love cars, I don't follow Deadmau5. It's not a celebrity lifestyle. It's, I mean, it is for him, clearly, but, for people like me, it's not. Because you've released on Mousetrap, which, don't get me wrong, is a huge achievement, and that's great. And, when I first got signed to Mousetrap, I had huge amounts of respect for the label and, lots of positive things to say about that whole thing. But it's not necessarily life-changing. And part of that is because I'm not super young, fresh, hip, exciting, whatever. I'm not I.O. or whatever the big thing is for them. So, but at the same time, and this is the important bit, is that at my age, having been in the industry as long as I have, I do okay and I'm happy. And that's kind of the point, is that, I think we live in a world where people get sold the idea of X Factor or whatever, these reality TV shows where, win £1 million contract. It could be you. You could become this superstar overnight sensation. And I just feel like, well, hang on. That yes, you could become that, but But there's a whole load of other jobs below that where people are just as happy and doing just as well. And there are some people who are, you know, I know a couple of ghost producers who earn phenomenal amounts of money. And they love doing, like I said earlier on, you know, ghost production. If you just love music production and the process, then ghost production is great, because, you know, you get to sit in your dark room and not speak to anyone. What a great job that is. You're not public facing. You just get to sit in your room and make music all day. Brilliant. And if you're good at it, and if you're good at the sales side of it as well, then there can be some serious career in there. You know, so there are lots of jobs in the music industry in terms of DJing and production as well. I know lots of DJs and producers who, you know, I know DJs, for example, who have managed to buy a house on gigs, and they're not famous. They travel to countries, and they, you know, but I know if I said their name on this channel, I'm not going to say their name because it's their private income, but I know that there are DJs that I could say their name on this channel and none of you would have heard their name, and yet they're still traveling from country to country, and, you know, every couple of weeks they're off to somewhere playing a fantastic gig and getting paid anything from £500 to maybe £2,000 or £3,000 per gig, you know, depending on location and everything like that, you know, and they're earning good money, and they're buying a house and driving a nice car and having children and having a wife or husband, or you know, a good quality life. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is that it's out there and it's achievable, and you don't have to be a super mega star to be happy. I guess that's the point of everything. So there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for making it this far into the video. I apologise for the pause. I know that also because when I took that phone call, I then shot downstairs to make another coffee and completely forgot where I was. So I apologise if at some point in this video there was a weird jump cut that kind of doesn't make sense. Hopefully I can edit it together. So there we go. If you've made it this far into the video, then please comment the word relax, because do you know what, this is going to show how weird Google is. I'm guessing it's because of Jockomaya's comment about lo-fi hip hop and boom bap. Where is it? Lo-fi hip hop radio, beats to relax and study to. So there we go. Spooky. Yeah, comment the word relax and I'll give you a high five in next week's video. Like I say, thanks for listening, watching, whatever it is you do, and I'll see you same time next week. Cheers.